Okay, I'm back, and where we left off was data entry into the computer. And I ran through a little bit of it before. I just restarted the mission so that I have some hope, fleeting hope, I guess, of making this time on target. It's way more simple than I thought it would be. So the data cartridge is in. What I need to do is go to Reflola on the dial right here, input 9099, and press LS, and that's going to be with this switch in the in position. So, okay, let me run through this real quick. Okay, so Reflola in 9099, enter. Okay, I get the flashing 9 telling me that the load's in progress, and I should get all zeros telling me, yeah, right there, that the load is complete. And that's it. I was reading a whole bunch more here. I was especially seeing stuff like this. Always input the start base and the current time and all this other stuff. That's already done with the data cartridge load, so there's no action required on our part other than just to verify that the data is good. So I'm going to go to the out position, and for example, Reflola, that's just telling me my current position. I have 9017, which if I go to my kneeboard and go to this table right here for Mosdoc, 9017 is the airfield number. If I, for example, select B2, it's going to give me the latitude and longitude, or actually longitude and then latitude, blinking alternately, B3, B4, and so on. If I go to the BANA position, it's going to give me the runway heading, so it's going to be 82.7 degrees once I get lined up, and the TILS frequency is 17. So I've just got to make sure that I take off on that runway. Now, if I wanted to take off on the other runway, I would just press LS, and it cycles back and forth. Wind data is going to be derived from Doppler data, and then the most important thing in my mind right now is TID, and by default it's going to count down to the throttle up time that I need to make that time on target. Okay, so I'm going to revisit that in a lot more detail as we go here. That's a subject that I could get bogged down on for 30-40 minutes if I'm not careful. Okay, let me go up to engine start. Actually, let me make sure I got everything here. Okay, canopy close and lock, and then start switch on for 2 seconds. So let's go canopy. Closed. Okay, that was 2 clicks. And yeah, I can hear the canopy actuator coming down. And closed, and I'm going to assume locked. Okay, so now start switch on for 2 seconds, and then we're going to be monitoring for all of this stuff. So let me go ahead and get this. Okay, I've got the throttle. Yeah, throttle is still out of cutoff. Start. Okay, it just stays in place. Okay, I can hear what I would assume is the gas turbine starter starting up, and that's going to get running, and then that is what's going to start to turn the engine. All this is completely automatic, so it's telling us check start sys within 5 seconds. Max EGT 400. Okay, EGT is up here. We can see it starting to come up, as well as RPMs. Let's see here. RPMs, I'm going to check 55 to 65 once the engine is up, and that looks like a good start. That snuck up on me, and you'll have been able to see all this stuff a lot better than I did in real time right there. Pressure ratio, I'm just going to check 1.0. Nozzle indicator full open. That's going to be around there. I'm going to assume that's full open to the right until proven otherwise. Max EGT 350, and it has stabilized at about 260. Indicator lights off. So I'm just down to that's going to be the light for my ejection system. And on the left side, yeah, I'm just down to the 3 green right there. That's a good sign when the lights start to go off like that. Okay, oil pressure may be lit for a max of 60 seconds, and then drop tank fuel I'm taking that to mean may also be on, and everything seems to be okay. And then SPAC light is on automatically. I think I'll take that as good and press. Okay, it gives us okay, this is things to clean up if we had started just with battery power. So I just need to come down and, okay, control surfaces check, pitch trim set for, I'm going to go for 0 without drop tank, -3 for a drop tank. Okay, so flight control check. I'll show you this in the external. I'm sure it's doing everything that it should be. Okay, there we go. Now trim. I need to set pitch trim 3 degrees. Okay, there we go. 3 degrees nose up. That's good for takeoff. I'm going to go for air brakes check, brake pressure check, ejection seat arm, altimeter, reset, master caution, check, autopilot, emergency disconnect, and then on. Okay, so let's go speed brakes. Out. Okay, I've got a light over here. Yep, Luftbremse. That's going to be speed brakes, I'm sure. And in. And lights off. You should have seen that in the external if all goes well here. Got 7 minutes to get out to the runway. And the rest here. Oh boy, it's going to be a long flight. I'm already feeling the effects here. Okay, brake pressure. Okay, the gauge up here is where it needs to be, about 260 or so. That's fine. Ejection seat arm, altimeter, warning lights check. Okay, ejection seat, altimeter is at the QFE setting. I've got a flag right there that I don't particularly like. I don't know what I could have missed to have that in the place. Maybe it's just something with a basic configuration of switches up here, but yeah, I'm going to take that as good. And one more lights check. And everything looks exactly like it did last time, except I do have an extra light up here that I didn't have on that first check. Okay, I'll take that as a good sign. Okay, I just paused and tried to find in the mapping an emergency disconnect for the autopilot. I'm going to press on. I'll revisit that later, but the SPAC light is back on. Wheel chocks remove, landing light to taxi, and then we get to the taxi and before takeoff. Okay, I think I'm still good. Yeah, if I'm a little late, I'm not going to sweat it. I can actually make some up en route. I had a speed of Mach 0.55, designated as the fuel-efficient way to get there, so I can cut into that if I need to. Now let's get the power off the aircraft, so ground electrical power off.
Chief, turn off the ground power.
Now, taxi to runway, full deflection gives a nose wheel rotation of about 30 degrees. I can use differential braking. Be careful with the throttle. I get relatively high amounts of thrust at idle, so I've got to be careful not to get going too fast here. But I can use thrust reverser, and I can back up with thrust reverser. Check the area is clear, and do not reverse if the surface consists of particles such as sand and stone. Okay, got it. And then, of course, the caution about not braking if I reverse. Now, we had radar initial setup. I want to get this as well before I get too far ahead of myself. Okay, let's go for position A0. And that's going to be on the stick. It is forward in A0. AS mode 1. Okay, this dial I'll get here in just a second. Passive search off. That is off. Lin log is in. Logarithmic log. Antenna elevation, middle position. Okay, that's simple enough. I just need to get this into the one position. I'll clean that up and figure out what I just did there once I get to radar. Okay, so let me request taxi to runway.
Enfield 1-1. Request taxi to runway. Enfield 1-1. Rudder, clear to taxi to runway 8.
Okay, runway 8. So that does, in fact... I sure thought that I had set this up to take off, like, just taxi out to the right and then take off in the opposite direction. Okay, runway 8 is 82.7 degrees. I'm going to take it that that is good. I'm going to... Okay, now let's get out of here. I've got a taxi to the other end. Okay, it's going to be a left-hand turn and then all the way down. That's fine, though. Like I said, I'm rushing a little bit, but not overly so. Okay, throttle's up. Now, brake check. Looks good. Throttle back to ground idle. Yeah, it did sort of take off on me there. Okay. A little more, I guess if I were describing it, comparing it to like the A10, a little more rudder deflection required to get the nose moving, but yeah, pretty reasonable to me. And 2 should be right here in this little revetted area. Okay, yeah, there he goes. Right behind me. Okay, so far so good. I'm a minute 42 from the planned takeoff time, and I'm going to be about 2 or 3 minutes late. Probably more like 4 or 5 minutes late because I want to run through the checklist. Now, let me pull it back to ground idle. I think I'll be okay to go sort of deeply into this here as I go. Okay, before takeoff, align with the runway, main course, backup and artificial horizon altimeter check. Master mode selector to nav, and yeah, that's right, I remember that. I need to wait until, at earliest, 2 minutes before throttle up to go master mode to nav. Manual course setting if needed. Press the reference button on the stick after carefully aligning with the runway heading. And we're going to compare the heading that we have on our system now to what it reads once we're lined up on the runway. And master caution and warning lights, check. If I had the external tank light on, it will go off after 70% RPM. HUD symbology check, landing light on. Let me click away so I have control of the aircraft again. I need to throttle up a little bit. Okay, there we go. Now, there was also a lot of other stuff I could have done, obviously, with the navigation system back there. It recommends in the manual just doing sort of like a little simulated fly-through of the mission, just going steer point by steer point, actually taking a manual fix at each steer point so that the aircraft thinks it's right there, so you can just sort of then compare the bearing and distance given on the instruments to what the plan is. I'll do that next time. I really don't want to touch too much. Okay, there we go. I've just counted down to the takeoff time and switched over to 9. I believe this just tells me the delta, or how far behind I am the planned takeoff time. That's when we want to take that to mean, at least. And yeah, we'll play with that. And in fact, I'll just go to the current position default setting right there. That's just fine. And yeah, and again, what I'm seeing is that by doing that data cartridge load first thing, it's really just a matter of coming down and verifying the information at that point. And, well, the nature of a simulation like this is that it's never going to be wrong. It's not going to break. It's going to be fairly good. So if a person wanted just to fire the aircraft up and then be confident that everything is set up, a person would be able to do that. I'm just going through the motions here because I want to know what's going on. So I'm coming up on the end of the runway. I'm just going to turn right, line up, and hold there for a second. That's where I'll go to nav on the master mode. We'll look at some HUD symbology and run through the takeoff procedure. I could taxi. Yeah, it's a Viggen, so it's built for short takeoffs. I could taxi to the end of the runway. Okay, let me concentrate here because the alignment that I get right here is going to be pretty important, because this is going to be like the initial fix that's in the aircraft system for the direction I'm facing. It's also going to, once the nose gear comes up, just start the navigation sequence and then measure just by a dead reckoning basically how far and in what direction we've gone. Now let me bump the nose around just a touch to the left here to get this exact. Okay, that's good. Now I should be 82.7 degrees right now. Okay, my main indicator right here is at 75. My backup is at 78 or so. Do I want to? I think if I pressed on right here, it would just automatically correct based on the direction I'm heading. I'm going to, however, press manual course setting if needed. Press reference button on the stick. This isn't going to hurt anything, because even if I have an invalid reference in there, it's going to, I think, correct itself. Okay, there we go. I just depress the button. It comes around to 82.7. I think, in fact, that might be the thing to do. Okay, this ADI heading is good as well. The backup is unchanged, but again, that's the nature of the backup. Okay, and in nav, now I have the takeoff symbology. So, takeoff using the HUD, apply brakes, advanced throttle, afterburner if needed, except be careful with zone 3. Check airspeed indicator and timeline. Now, I've seen this in other videos. These two lines, well, I'll describe this in real time, but those are going to tell me when to rotate. And then, since I'm using afterburner, I'm going to use like a low stage of the afterburner. I'll rotate until this indicator is at the top of the little pillars right there. Then it's going to turn back into being a velocity vector. Okay, so brakes held, throttle's up. Caution warning's good. Engine instruments are as good as good enough, I guess, to me. Okay, brakes release. Okay, I'll go for a second stage of the afterburner. Just going to track it as closely to the center line as I can here as it gets the nav fix, and we can see at the bottom those lines starting to come over. going to rotate when they intersect. If I can keep eyes on. Give me a little PIO with the rudder. I better correct that. I'm going to let it damp out. I'm going to rotate. I'm going to go gear up. That was not as safe as I would have preferred. Okay, and it warned me also about a little sink rate that I'll get going as the gear comes up, because those four-plane flaps are tracked at that point. I was able to anticipate and correct. I just need to get, yeah, I think I've just got such a heavy, draggy aircraft. Okay, so now I've got my velocity vector back, and now I've stepped up to my first steer point, B1, which is going to be about 50, 60, 70 Swedish miles, so 10 kilometers, behind me and to the left. Okay, so that wasn't pretty, but man, I got into such a PIO, pilot-induced oscillation right there with rudder at the very end, correcting in one direction, but that just sort of exacerbated the problem, didn't correct it. So the thing to do there is exactly what I did, just release the controls, let it damp out naturally, and then I was able to rotate. I actually over-rotated and got the aircraft airborne. That was more excitement than I wanted, in other words.